John Scully, author of Moonshot, former CEO of both Pepsi and Apple, entrepreneur and mentor. So nice to talk to you.
Thank you, Rhonda.
Is Apple today the same kind of adaptive innovator it was when it launched that computer that really made computing something accessible to everyone?
Absolutely. I think Apple has brilliant management today. Tim Cook has done just an incredible job of being able to take over from probably the world's greatest CEO ever, Steve Jobs, and to be able to adhere to those principles that Steve laid down. And by the way, those are the same principles that I learned from Steve back in the early 1980s. At the time I worked with him, he was not an experienced executive that he later became, but he was still brilliant. He had great innovative ideas. He saw the world in big frameworks of constructs that literally changed the world, as we all know. And Tim Cook has been able to keep those important principles alive, and yet at the same time he's been able to add things that are important at this stage of Apple's growth, which is how do you manage this incredible complexity of the world's most valuable corporation when you're selling everywhere in the world and everybody's trying to knock you off.
So Apple, of course, at the Developers Conference came out with a music streaming service. Is Apple becoming really a media company like a Google or like a Twitter, for instance? Would we consider these now more media companies?
Not really. I think Apple has always been a company that focuses first on exceptional user experience, and it does it by making the trade-offs between hardware and software, but it's always chosen to make its highest profit from hardware, not from software or from content. And so Apple is really distancing Samsung, because Samsung is only hardware, and Samsung is very vertically integrated, so they make very good hardware at very good costs. But Samsung has not been as successful as Apple in building out an ecosystem of integrating software and hardware for those trade-offs. So what does Apple have today? It's got Apple Pay. It's got now streaming music with Beats. It is eventually going to take Apple TV, I think, and reinvent television as we know it. It's moving into automobiles. It's got what they call continuity, which means that you can start viewing video on your iPhone, you can move to your iPad, and then you can move to your MacBook, and it's all the same. And so they've done an incredible job of making it simple for users to get all kinds of media experiences, but I wouldn't call them a media company.
You don't see the product innovation cycle at Apple stalling, do you?
Absolutely not. No, I think if anything, they have it running like a well-oiled machine. They have terrific people at the top of the organization. They continue to recruit highest quality talent in from many different sectors, more recently from the fashion industry. And I think that Apple takes its time. If a product isn't ready, a lot of us expected that Apple TV would be introduced at the Worldwide Developer Conference in June, and they postponed it. Not because I think it wasn't well developed, but there are a lot of rights issues with media content that have to be in place if you're going to really reinvent what is now the cable TV industry. And I think Apple will do it, and whether they do it later in this year or whether they do it next year, it doesn't make that much difference because they have so many things going for them, particularly the tremendous success of the iPhone 6.
What's Apple's vulnerability?
The biggest vulnerability that any successful company has is to become a victim of its own success. We saw that happen with Microsoft and Intel when they dominated the personal computer industry during the era of the launch of the web in the 1990s. We saw that happen with Kodak, who owned photography and made the decision to double down on film processing because they were concerned about Walmart selling a single-use camera and being a major competitor to them at exactly the moment that Apple launched the iPhone. And the rest of the story was 3 years later, Kodak filed for bankruptcy and Apple had redefined photography. So it's very easy for companies to become victims of their own success. I think Apple has been smart enough to keep an eye on all the moving parts that are going on in different domains.
Well, that's where we're going to end it. John Scully, author of Moonshot, it's been great chatting with you. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Rhonda.